Welcome to the Intellectual Conversations podcast, where we endeavour to have intellectual conversations. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad.
All right. It's been a while since we've got out our weekly podcast.
Yeah, it's been like, a month since our last weekly podcast?
Yeah, but what the internet doesn't know is we've actually attempted 2 podcasts in which, the last one I think you did pretty well, but I've kind of failed miserably. And I've done some thinking as to what the cause was, and I feel like just completely freestyling it, just recording and seeing where we go is good, but I get a bit anxious unless we have something prepared to talk about. So that's what leads me to today's topic, which is meditation. So we needed to do something so that I wouldn't get anxious and not want a podcast. So we picked a topic, and I've spent just, the last couple of days listening to some talks and just thinking a bit about meditation. I didn't want to get too over-prepared because I know if I do, I'll talk too much and you'll get the shits. So I figured we could start this conversation with some questions that I want to ask you.
Okay.
So, if you remember way back when we first started talking about meditation, you never wanted to talk about it. You got angry at the topic. You were very skeptical. You didn't think it was a load of shit, but you didn't want to hear it. Yet now here we are, and you're willing to have a podcast about it. What's changed? What's going
on? All right. So my dad's always preaching about meditation, and when someone talks about something a bit too much, you just get over it, and whenever someone mentions just a slight thing about that topic, you're just automatically disgusted by it because of how much info you've been bombarded by unwillingly.
Right.
So that is why I have such a strong opinion about meditation, I guess.
Okay.
But I never thought that it was hocus pocus. And I think it really helps to reduce anxiety, and after meditating for every day for about a few months in the past. I don't do this right now, but I did do it before, and it showed really great results. So yeah, I can't say it doesn't work.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit like for you it's meditation. For me it's Linux. Everyone's probably got that thing that their dad's spoken about way too much that you just do not give a shit about anymore. Could be the war. Could be whatever it is that they're into. So yeah, I didn't know that. Oh, I think I did, but I forgot. But that makes a lot of sense. So your opinions changed somewhat. It sounds like you never had any issue with it, though. I thought you were skeptical about whether it was all bullshit or not, and I wanted to talk to you about what had changed your mind from being skeptical to being at least seeing that there's some benefit in it. But would you say you just weren't skeptical to begin with? You were just over the topic?
I was skeptical because I knew nothing about it, and I'm always skeptical about things that I don't know about.
Well, that's a healthy attitude to have.
Yep. Anyway, so yeah, I guess that's why I was skeptical, because I know nothing about it. But now that I know something about it, and I've talked to a few people who have some sort of knowledge about meditation, I guess I'm a bit more open as to the effects of meditation, which are mostly positive on your mental health.
Oh, to be honest, I don't think I've ever heard anyone report a negative effect.
Well, I have actually.
Really?
Yeah, James told me that. Well, we were just talking. We we bumped into each other, and he was like, "Oh, you seem like you're in a great mood," and I was like, "Yeah, I just meditated. Fabulous day."
As you do, yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, really? How do you find meditation?" He was really interested in the topic, and he was like, "Yeah, for me, whenever I want to meditate, after I meditate, I feel really drowsy, I feel really sleepy, and like some sort of meditation does put you in that sort of sleepiness trance, and that's mostly relaxation types of meditation, but I don't think mindfulness meditation does that to you."
Right. Yeah, I was having this thought today. Well, actually, firstly, I just want to say, I think when I said I never heard of anyone having a bad experience, yeah, that's completely not true. I've heard plenty of people just, like, I guess what I mean is there's no, like, negative effects on them. They might not enjoy it, but it's not going to do anything bad to them, you know what I mean? Like, I think some people have gone a little bit too deep into meditation and gone a little bit crazy, but I don't know of any personal stories. My dad always warned me, he's like, because he was into yoga, and in yoga they call it Raja Yoga, the royal path, because you got Hatha Yoga, which is like all the postures and stuff, and various types of yoga. And he always said that you got to do it with a trained teacher, or else you can get a little bit crazy. And I think he did when he was younger. Like, you know how the Buddhists go on about detachment and stuff, and not, I guess, a bad interpretation of detachment and maybe getting a little bit down the path without good guidance is you could just stop giving a shit about things that are important in life. So I think that's something that some people are scared of. But
what do you mean by not giving a shit about things in life? Like that blasé sort of attitude about life, because everything's like you're just a spectator of your own body, and everything out there is just happening.
I guess, like, apparently family members were telling him that he was so, like, ice cold, he wasn't emotional anymore. And
what, your dad?
Yeah, when he was doing a lot of this practice. And, like, I don't think that's necessarily a result of meditation practice. I think it can be under certain circumstances, but, like, it's certainly not the goal. I think in many ways it can make you more connected and more warm and more loving, but I don't know. Anyway, let's
okay.
I wanted to get back to what you were saying about people falling asleep and stuff, like, and whether or not mindfulness is like that. Because this, like, I'm in no way a meditation expert. I wanted to be before this podcast, but I realized a couple of days wasn't going to change much. And instead, like, it's something I'm very interested in. I want to use the podcast as motivation to, like, actually look at studies in depth and see what evidence is out there, and, just get people on that are practitioners and talk about different styles and that sort of thing. But I've been a bit confused about this myself when you try and figure out, like, what is the point of meditation. And one style that I've learnt, my meditation teacher, he'd learned a bit of the Indian yoga sort of Buddhist approach to meditation, and then he'd gone over to Japan and lived in a monastery as a monk for a couple of years and learned the Zen tradition. So stuff he's taught me, some I'm not really sure which tradition it comes from, but basically the whole idea is that you want to utilize relaxation. For him, meditation only begins once the body was fully free from any tension, your breath had been slowed down, you'd controlled your mind through a mantra to focus on one point, and then you, like, slowly let that mantra go, and then you're left in this place where you've got no thoughts, you've got no feedback from your body, you've got your breath all slowed down, and I don't know, it sounds really great, but it's hard to get into that state. But when you try this style of meditation, like, you feel very, very relaxed. And it's all about control, like controlling your body and your mind and everything and putting it in that place. But then you learn mindfulness-based practices, and they're saying to just observe and do it non-judgmentally. Don't try and control your breath, just observe your breath. And it left me kind of confused as to what the point of it is and which one's right and which one's wrong. And what do you think of that, about the difference between those styles?
Well, firstly, I don't know the history or the origins of these meditation styles, so I can't really comment on them. But I think from the general gist of what they are, they both could be helpful for people in everyday life. For example, with the mindfulness meditation, the point of it is to be mindful of how you're feeling everywhere in your body, from head to toe, as well as be mindful of your surroundings. So you can do that anywhere, and I think that's great in terms of using it as a technique to reduce anxiety. And I think a version of that would be grounding, right? A lot of people with anxiety who go to psychologists are taught to use grounding, which is you name what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you feel, and just focus on that rather than what you're anxious at the time or panicking at the time. And that really helps people to reduce their anxiety. And that's pretty much mindfulness meditation, right? But just with your eyes open. And you can do that anywhere. And I mean, I know this is quite specific, what I'm talking about, like people with anxiety, but I think everyone has those moments where they, feel a bit anxious, like for a job interview, for example. You can do this mindfulness meditation to help you get over it. But for the relaxation one, I think it helps you with sleep, if you have issues with sleep, because it fully relaxes you. And I've done that before, and it really puts you to sleep.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I can say about that relaxation one, because I can't see any other use of it.
Well, were you lying down?
Yes.
Well, there you go. So, I guess the beginner phase of it is to relax all the tension in your body, all the muscular tension, by first lying down and practicing at it. And generally, you do fall asleep in the earlier phases, but like your body is more inclined naturally to fall asleep when you're lying down. So then you want to start practicing that while you're sitting up. And there's going to be some muscles which are always going to be active because they're holding up your posture and everything. But because of that, plus the fact that, like your, I guess there's feedback systems in your brain and everything, and you're more inclined to stay awake when you're sitting up. So if you release all the tension in your body as much as you can while you're sitting, and you're not falling asleep, you just go into this really calm place where like everything's okay, and stuff comes up. See, I think this is what's sort of therapeutic about it. Like things will come up in your mind when you just like you might be blank for a couple of seconds, but then your mind produces something, and something else, and it just goes over and over again, and you let it go, and you let it go, and you let it go every time your mind produces something new. But sometimes it can produce things like a memory of something either traumatic from your past or something embarrassing you did that day, or whatever it is. You seem to gravitate towards things that you haven't processed yet. And I think the beauty of it is, like, how every time you access a memory, you change it, like the emotional context and I guess content. So if you're in that really deep, relaxed place, and then you think about those things that come to mind that are really troubling for you, and if you can find a way to just be okay with it, keep on relaxing, and just let it go, I think you've just done a little bit of like unwiring that negative conditioning that was leading to it feeling so bad, and just done a little bit of, putting it in that direction of having a nicer context next time you bring that up. And I think that's, like cathartic.
Yeah, it's like it helps you reach acceptance for the things you haven't accepted yet. Right? So it's quite funny how when you close your eyes and try to meditate, or even if you just not call it meditation, right? Anyone can close their eyes and just try to relax for bit, but there's always these negative thoughts that pop into your head. It's always negative, but most of the time it's negative. And that's part of who we are as humans. It's mostly negative. And yeah, that's a really great point, that meditation can help you, release some of that negativity that you have in your thoughts in life. Because when you go through everyday life, just go through your day, these negative thoughts pop up and you just take it as normal, right? Because like if a friend says like a nasty comment, whether they meant it or not, like you have this negative feeling of, oh, that friend doesn't like me. But if you are a person who practices meditation, you'll be able to, be mindful of it, or just do some meditation and let go of it. And that really helps you to focus on the bigger things in life rather than holding on to the grudge.
Well, that's right. I think it's a habit of mind. Like, there's a process which you're doing in meditation that you're training to then be able to take into your daily life. So when you think about it, like, an idea pops into your head. Whatever practice of meditation you're doing, there's generally this concept of refocusing to what your object of focus is. So if something pops into your head, it's not just meaningless. Well, I mean, it can be, but let's say something meaningful pops into your head. It's going to have associated emotion as well. So you've dedicated this next 20 minutes to sitting down and doing your practice, and you get caught up thinking about that thing, and then you're like, oh shit, I want to focus on my breath again. So you've got to let it go. Like, it's not just letting the thought go, it's letting the emotion go. And that process being trained over and over again of first having the skills of observation or introspection, mindfulness, whatever you want to call it, to be aware of the fact that something negative has just come into your thought process, and then to decide to let it go and to be able to release that emotion. That's something you've practiced over and over and over again while you're sitting there, that you can take into your daily life, to be aware of when things start to turn south and you start to feel a bit shitty. Like, you've got this skill in your toolbox to apply to this situation now, which you didn't have before.
Yeah, and I've read studies on how if you take a happy drug and put a rat in a context where they've been shocked, right, and they, obviously have fearful, anxious emotions surrounding that context, when you put them in the second time without the drugs, they'll be okay with it, compared to a control rat who didn't have that drug, which makes you feel happy. And mindfulness is kind of like that drug, right? It's in your control. You don't have to go to the chemist to get it. You don't have to take it, and then it's in your control. And that's the beauty of meditation, right? It's free. You can do it anytime. You can do it anywhere. Well, nearly anywhere, as long as you're in a safe environment. And I think that's also a great example of neuroplasticity, because memories are rewirable, right? Every single time you bring up a memory, it's changed a bit, right? I can't specifically tell you the exact paper that says this, or the theory that says this, but
we can find it and link it to the podcast. Oh yeah.
Yes, but every single time you try to remember a memory, it changes. So your memories of your childhood isn't actually what happened, which is kind of tricky. But if you keep remembering all your past memories, bringing them up, and whilst you're feeling good, whilst you're in this state of acceptance, of, okayness, if you will, then I think you'll be a much happier person. And who doesn't want to be a happy person? Who doesn't want to be content with your life and move on from the past and work towards something better in the future?
Yeah. And I mean, all that's true, but the way you describe it just made it sound so easy. Like,
oh no,
it's
just
like
easy, but
no, but like comparing it to a drug, obviously there's all sorts of
drugs
effects. Well, not necessarily. Sometimes you can do your darndest to take a lot of drugs and feel great, but still not manage to feel great. There's a lot of trust me. There's a lot of variables involved. But generally, you take the drug, you feel better. It's a pretty reliable effect. Not necessarily the case with meditation, though. It's not like it's something you can take, and it's not necessarily always going to make you feel better. And that's a bit of a pitfall that, like, people will think, I meditated yesterday and I reached this place where I just felt amazing. They think that that positive feeling is the object of meditation. So therefore, if you meditate the next day, I just couldn't meditate. I just couldn't get into that zone where I felt good, and they feel like they failed at it. And I mean, this obviously happened to me, and I think it's something a lot of people trip out on. And like, to continue the practice of meditation, like, it needs to be reinforcing. You need to, just like anything, you need to feel like you're accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish, or you need to feel good about it. But it doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always fix whatever problem that you've got. And like, it's important to realize that, because like, that's a stumbling block along the path of developing the skill of meditation. This is what I've been thinking recently, and I wanted to run it past you. What I've decided to sort of just, for the meantime, in my own practice, because I want to get back into it, I want to just throw away the terms mindfulness. I want to throw away the terms meditation, all this stuff. I want to just keep it really simple, and I just want to be more observant. I wrote this up on the wall, so I'm looking at. I want to train myself to be more observant, but non-judgmentally. And just to bring the word mindful back into it, I'm pretty sure that's the point of it all. Like, you got this relaxation response, which I was listening to this Harvard talk where they were going on about all the health benefits of meditation, and they're studying mindfulness-based meditative practices, and none of it's about controlling your body. None of it. They never tell you to slow down your breath. They never tell you to try and initiate the relaxation response, which they're comparing to the stress response, and they're saying conceptually it's like the opposite, which makes sense. But there's this weird thing where the more you try to do it, it's like trying to fall asleep. You can't try to fall asleep. You've just got to allow yourself to fall asleep. Often when you try to do things, you end up doing the opposite. Don't look down. You want to let go of something. It's not like the relaxation response. I mean, sure, you can get full control over it if you practice hard enough, but for a lot of people, it's not something that you can intentionally do, or at least this is what I'm sort of assuming, that it's not something that you can intentionally do. It's something that you can allow to happen. You can allow your body to relax. You can allow calmer feelings to overcome you. And I think through the process of sitting down, just focusing on your breath, focusing on being aware of the thoughts that are coming into your mind, and then letting them go and returning to the breath, I think it's just like falling asleep. It's something that's going to just happen. It's not something that you have to force to do. So I still want to learn to consciously control those sort of systems, the autonomic nervous system, heart rate, and everything. Like, I think that's an awesome thing about yoga, learning to go in and control your body. Still want to do that, but I think what I'm getting at is, in mindfulness-based practice, I think maybe they're overcoming a potential stumbling block of trying too hard to control everything that's in your body, everything that's in your mind, everything that's in your feelings, and just allowing it to be there. Just being aware, just observing, and then allowing however you feel to be however you feel. And then as a result, you're probably going to allow yourself to relax and allow yourself to feel better. But anyway, just all these concepts of mindfulness meditation, of Zen practice, of enlightenment, of like all these words are also loaded, and there's so many expectations surrounding them. And I think sometimes you can get bogged down in trying to analyze where you're at and what you're doing, and whether or not it's the correct form of practice. And I think people can just get really lost. I know I certainly have got really lost and confused. So just to simplify it, just want to focus on being more observant. Just sit down, throw all the hocus pocus out the window, just try and observe your breath. Just pretend there's a little muscle inside your brain that controls your attention, and all you're doing is working it out. It's going to practice being more observant, and then obviously train yourself to, or a key to being more observant is to be able to be non-judgmental and more compassionate, because, as I'm sure we'll get into, they can be sort of sticking points. Sorry guys, we took a short snack break. Okay, so I'm going on about this relaxation response versus observing, and your powers of attention, and observing without judgment. And basically what I'm trying to get at is what I think the point of meditation is, but then also just some other sort of features of it. But I guess I'll just ask you the question. What do you think the point of meditation is? What do you think we're trying to accomplish when we sit down and do it?
So that question automatically assumed that meditation is about sitting down and meditating, rather than every day just being mindful, right?
Okay, no, just in general. You don't have to be sitting down.
Okay, so I personally think that there's no one definition of what meditation is for, firstly, but I think the most, I don't want to say useful or beneficial mentally, but just from personal experience, I think that sitting down and letting go of stuff when you're meditating is really helpful for me, because I ruminate and I dwell on about negative events a lot. But I think it has its place with being mindful all the time as well, because especially when you're an anxious person, it really helps when you're in an anxious situation, and use meditation to relieve some of that anxiety. So I guess what I'm trying to say ultimately is that meditation, what it's for, it's a tool. It's a tool for you to help you get mentally well, right? And I mean that's a pretty broad definition of the use of meditation, but I think ultimately that's it.
Right. Well, do you think that you learn how to meditate to learn how to relax?
What do you mean?
So, well, maybe let's start talking about stress for a little bit, right? Stress is really bad for you. Well, it depends what you mean by stress. Chronic stress is really bad for you. Everyone knows that. So you find yourself in a stressful situation, and you utilize your mindfulness and meditation tools. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get yourself to relax?
To relax? No. I mean, to physically relax to a certain point, yes, if you're physically revved up, because obviously with anxiety, a lot of the symptoms are physical, like your heart beats faster, your breathing gets more labored, and so forth. But it's got to do with mental stuff as well, right? Meditation isn't just about relaxing your body. It's about noticing what you're feeling and what you're thinking, as well as how you're feeling in your body physically, and trying to reach a place where you're okay.
Right. Yeah, and I think that comes through so when you sit down and you're mindful of your breathing or whatever it is, it's like a muscle that's being trained and it's getting stronger and stronger, and it's the muscle of paying attention. But paying attention doesn't cause you to relax. I think what happens is it's like the first step towards changing your mental state. Like if we're just reactive all the time, it's like being on autopilot. Something happens, and then as a response, you get angry, you get anxious, you do whatever you do. How are you supposed to change your behavior if it's all happening so fast and so automatically that you don't even notice it? So I think the strength of like having strong powers of observation or focus or attention, whatever you want to call it, um, if you can have that activated and switched on all the time, I think it opens a lot of opportunities for you to start making choices about how you feel. Like sometimes you can get stuck on something. In that acceptance and commitment therapy books, like they call it being fused. So your mental state is like you're kind of in Buddhism stuff. They'll say that it's like delusion. I don't know. That gets a bit too philosophical. I don't think I'm ready to start going into the nature of the self and self-realization and all that kind of stuff. But it's sort of a similar thing that like you're identifying with the thought that's come into your head, with the feeling. You don't have any like you don't have any perspective on it. You're not being objective. You're just so caught up in how you feel that I think the first step towards being able to choose to feel a different way, to choose to want to not be as angry, not be as anxious, whatever it is that observation, to then be able to get a bit of distance and be like, oh wow, I'm feeling this way. Even just saying I'm feeling angry, like it separates you a little bit from the anger. Do you get what I mean?
So, in a way, are you trying to say meditation isn't really about relaxation? It's about being conscious of what you're feeling?
I think that's the first step. Like, I don't know. I think you can get to a point where you can completely control your arousal system. You've got yogis and all sorts of people who have done amazing feats, like Wim Hof, for example. He's this crazy Dutch guy that can swim in ice water, and a lot of people would just completely freak out and go into full-blown shock. Like he's got a lot of control over his autonomic nervous system, which obviously is usually not under your conscious control. So I think these like Zen sort of practices where you're learning to control your relaxation response, I think they have when you master them, I think it is possible to master them, and I think that's awesome to be able to choose to relax when you need to. Obviously, chronic stress wouldn't be an issue for you because you can switch off your HPA axis when you need to. And that's a big problem for people who can't switch it off once they get revved up. It's one of the symptoms of depression when your hippocampus shrinks and then you can't start the release of the what is it that switches off your HPA axis? You know the HPA axis.
Yeah.
So the H is hippocampus, right?
Yeah.
Hippocampus, pituitary,
and amygdala. I'm not sure if P is pituitary or parahippocampus.
I'm pretty sure it's pituitary.
Yeah.
So anyway, the response to shut down the system when it's revved you up comes from the hippocampus, which in depressed people shrinks and is ineffective and can't switch off the system.
I thought it was all anxiety.
Well, I don't know. See, like this was the stress lecture that I was listening to recently, and I think there's a lot of blurred lines between anxiety and depression.
Anyway, so going back to the relaxation versus just being mindful or being conscious of how you're feeling, right? I feel like what you're ultimately trying to say is that meditation isn't just about relaxation. It's about making an effort or making that observation consciously about where you're at mentally and physically, and making a choice if mentally and physically you're not at the place you want, and making that choice to change it, right? It's not only about relaxing, because for the example of Wim Hof, that's a great example of when it's not just relaxation. It's him trying to rev himself up so that he can manage the cold. And in certain cases, I feel like mindfulness really helps when you're not trying to relax yourself, when you're trying to rev yourself up. An example of that would be for procrastinators, right? When you procrastinate, it's because you're not revved up. You're a lazy cunt and you don't want to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But
Can't believe you just said that on a podcast. Drop the C-bomb. Intellectual Cunts podcast.
Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is when I meditated on a regular basis, I felt like I procrastinated less because I was conscious of when I was procrastinating, because I was observing myself so much.
Yeah.
And I would be like, okay, you're being lazy now. Get some work done because you know you want to do it, and you know it's going to make you feel good, and you know that's where you want to be.
Yeah. So you can diffuse from. You're not stuck in the latest train of thought that's running through your mind, which may be, telling you, "I'll do this and do that," because we want to avoid the assignment that we have to do.
Yeah.
So, like, this sort of comes back to a lot of stuff they say in ACT therapy about it all being about acceptance. Like, it could be that you're aware of how you're feeling or the thought that's jumped into your head, and you've got a choice now. It might not even be to change the way you feel. It could be to just accept it and make a little bit of room for it, as they're always saying, and just stop ruminating, like stop dwelling on it and replaying it over and over and over again. Like, there might be a problem there which you legitimately need to solve, but you don't need to think about it all day. Like, it seems like it's just processing the emotion when you accept it. So that's why I was going on about this distinction between just being observant and learning how to relax and stuff, because like this was I think the issue that they had in this style of practicing meditation things where you're using that relaxation response. Like, what if you can't? What if you can't let it go? What if you can't unwind yourself because the situation's just too severe? It's like you've got nothing then. If your whole technique and strategy relied on you being able to release all this tension, to just release this thought, not think about it anymore, sometimes you just need to accept how you're feeling. Like Wim Hof's an interesting case, right? Like, what you were saying about him revving himself up, in many ways, for him to do what he's doing, he's calming himself down. Like, you need to just completely focus on the cold, and I think he does some visualization techniques where he imagines heat in his body or something. But it's kind of like, I imagine like being in a fight. Like, you've got a lot of, you're very revved up, you've got a lot of adrenaline, you've got a lot of arousal, but you need to be able to also at the same time calm yourself down so that you can stay focused on what you're doing and not overthink and not bring yourself away from it. You've got to allow your body to do what it needs to do. So that's where acceptance can come into it. Like, it doesn't have to be all relaxation. It doesn't have to be this place that you can get to when you've been meditating in a cave for 3 hours and have lost all sensation of your body to suddenly, become enlightened. Like, it can be in the midst of all the craziest shit that's going on in your life. Just that little observation of, like, that little bit of detachment from your situation, from how you're feeling, like, can matter so much. Just noticing, oh shit, I'm angry. Have you ever noticed how you feel kind of relieved when you realize that you're angry?
Yeah, especially during my lady days. For lady days, if I don't know that I'm PMSing, I get so angry at everything. I get so irritated at everything. I hate everyone, and nothing's going to plan. But when I do know that I am on my lady days, I'm conscious of it. I observe myself and how I feel, and physically and mentally,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to be okay with it. Most of the time it works. Some of the time it doesn't. But hey, it's better than not knowing. It's better than ignorance,
Right.
right?
Definitely. So, like, your cause might be that neurochemical cause, right? And I can actually relate to that because I've had a very different, but in weird ways, sort of similar experience. I used to have a bad drug problem, and I used to take a lot of amphetamines, and the feeling that you get on the come down, it's so weird. Like, as opposed to being a bad mood, or as opposed to being a negative feeling that you've got caused by, so yeah, as opposed to a bad state that you could be in as a reaction to a negative situation that's happened in your life, like you're really sad because you lost your job or whatever it is, right? Like being on a come down, you're in a really bad place. You're in a bad mood. You feel shit. You're so reactive to everything. You're more likely to get angry. You're more likely to get depressed. You can't focus. You can't engage in things. Like, you're in a really bad place. But the really weird thing about it is that you know the real cause is the drugs you took on the weekend. So often you can get caught up in thinking you're angry or upset about one thing, but in fact you're just sort of venting on that or just thinking about that as a distraction or whatever the cause may be. It's really something else that you're upset about. And like reminding yourself it's just to come down and not taking the thoughts that you're having too seriously really sort of helps a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something similar to when you're PMSing and you say to yourself, okay, I know I'm PMSing. I know I'm not really as upset as I'm telling myself right now. And you got to kind of just remind yourself that it's temporary and that the feelings will pass and that everything's okay. So it's sort of a similar thing to what we're talking about with meditation. And that was one of Buddha's big teachings, is the impermanence of mind, the impermanence of everything. But like mental states and thoughts and everything arise and then go away. And there's like a release in realizing that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that theory. I mean, it happens. It's not just a theory.
Yeah.
But I like knowing that it's only temporary.
Right.
Even though at the time I'm like, fuck this shit.
Yeah. Like, it's amazing. You know how logical you are, right? As a person, if you're posed with some kind of problem, you can figure it out and you can be rational, you can be logical. But when you're in the grips of some emotional state, like, it's only when you look back on it later that you realize how non-rational and how non-logical the way you were feeling was.
Oh, tell me about it. Why didn't you wash the dishes? A day later, shit, did I really say that?
Well, yeah. Anyway, I wanted to get to two things. One is habits. Like, a lot of people start practices of meditation and they know it's a good idea and it's just like dieting, exercise and whatever. It's all just something on the list that they're never getting to. And two, I wanted to get into, okay, I can't really get into this too deeply because I need to do more research, but I wanted to get into some studies on meditation and what they've shown, particularly with relation to neuroimaging and stuff like that. So, as a segue into this, I'm having a lot of trouble trying to change my habits in general to more positive and healthy habits. And I was reading this blog post the other day. This guy's talking about meditation practice, and he said, you know what? I know it's really good for me, but I don't meditate every day, even though I know I should. And his his solution to this, and he said that this is what he does for all sorts of habits when he knows he should do something he doesn't. It's like a motivation-based approach. He said he just bombards his brain with reasons as to why this is important and this is good. So he went and evaluated all these studies, and he came up with 26 superhuman benefits that meditation gives you. And this was a way of him bombarding his own brain, and hopefully those of the people that read it, with reasons as to why meditation's so good for you that you should just go and do it straight away. So I want to try a similar sort of approach with meditation and with these podcasts and videos that we're doing. I want to delve really deeply into the science of it to give myself some solid reasons as to why I should do it, some inescapable reasons that, you know, I won't be able to just forget about and move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have this problem where they know it's good for them and they just can't seem to stick to it. And I know a big part of that is habits, but like habits alone, nurturing good habits and knowing the principles of habit formation, I don't think alone they're enough. Like, I think you need that initial surge of motivation to really stick to something. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying with that article about 21 benefits of meditation sounds like propaganda. Right? No, I'm serious. Like advertising, propaganda. They are using a technique in order to get the desired behavior, right? But it's obviously for money and for the benefit of that company, of that business, of the corporation. Manipulation, pretty much. Why can't you use that technique of manipulation?
Self-manipulation.
Exactly.
Why has no one ever done self-manipulation? Sounds like a form of torture or something. Self-mutilation. But anyway, yeah, I like that. I like that idea.
Yeah, it's like if people can be convinced to eat Macca's, knowing that Macca's is so bad for you, at least it, like, what does it lead to? Diabetes, heart disease, you name it. And if you can convince people to do something bad for them with advertising, you can convince someone to do something that's good for them.
Well, that's right.
Logically,
yeah. Yeah, the problem in our society, though, is that, like, unless something has a financial incentive, they won't do it. So it's like, it's hard to make money out of people meditating, you know? So, although I've seen this guy trying to argue about the cost savings on an individual by the health benefits of meditation, and this was in America, and obviously the health system works different to ours, and you got to pay for a lot more, I think. And they were saying how much money you could save every year if you took up this meditation practice, and he was trying to give it a financial incentive, basically saying that you'll go to the doctor less. And that's something interesting in and of itself that we could probably get into. But yeah, I just thought that was funny. But definitely self manipulation. Like, we can, through the podcast, do that for ourselves. Keep advertising the benefits of things that we know are good for us, and hopefully other people listening to it will have that manipulated, advertised to effect, and, you know, do something positive in their life.
Yeah.
So on that, I don't know enough about the research on meditation. All right. Part of the reason why I want to meditate so much is because of my ADHD, which is also the reason why I'm not that great at researching. So hopefully I can just work my way up through interviewing more and more people in the field and in the academic world to learn through them and not have to research. But I also do want to improve my skills there. So I haven't got much to add to this, but just as a introductory sort of thing, I have been looking at some studies over the past couple of days, and I found it really interesting. This study showed that through meditative practice, you can reduce the size of the amygdala. Well, that's what it was suggesting. Obviously, there's all sorts of issues with studies. Is it causation? Is it correlation? blah, blah, blah. But it looked pretty convincing that I think they said the right side of the amygdala basically shrinks through neuroplasticity. So, yeah, do you want to, just for anyone that doesn't understand neuroplasticity, do you want to just give a quick description of what it means?
So yeah, sure. Neuroplasticity is pretty much self-explanatory in the word. Neuro meaning brain, plastic meaning malleable or being able to be changed. So your brain, people thought that once you hit adulthood, your brain doesn't really change, but that's wrong. Your brain does change. Every single thing that you do, pretty much this is a theory. Pretty much everything that you do changes your brain and its wiring. So the neurons itself in your brain, which are like the building blocks of the brain in the cellular level, it doesn't change, but the connections between these neurons change. And this is where neuroplasticity comes in. So, for example, your eyes are connected to the back of your brain, which is called the visual cortex, and these connections change with age. When you get older, you become more blind, and those connections are gradually weakened, and more neurons that are connected, those connections die. And that is one sort of neuroplasticity in the degenerative form, but it can be generative as well, right? Classic study on taxi drivers hippocampuses or hippocampi are larger compared to the normal population in the control. We can link that paper, and this just shows that with the use of your hippocampus, which is used for mapping and going places, which is what taxi drivers need to do in London. They need to remember all the street names and where to go and stuff. And the hippocampus is so big. Like, that just means that through the use of a brain area, it can grow.
Right. Yeah, and like, haven't they done studies of like neuromapping and stuff? And say someone's a musician, they use their fingers a lot more if they're playing the guitar or the piano or whatever. And the representation on the neural maps of both, I think, somatosensory cortex and motor cortex, like that area that you're using a lot, gets bigger.
Yeah.
So basically, any brain region that you're utilizing a lot grows. Any part that you're not shrinks, right? So it's like the use it or lose it sort of thing.
Yep.
So with that in mind, like the significance of the amygdala shrinking, what does the amygdala do?
Emotion. It is the center of emotion. When you feel an emotion, your amygdala lights up. What that really means, it's not really clear. You can't really say that the amygdala is responsible for emotion just because it lights up when you're feeling happy or when you're feeling sad. Having said that, it is believed that the amygdala is responsible for the conscious emotion of the consciousness of emotion, right? It's responsible for that.
Okay.
People say that. And when you say that the amygdala shrinks, it just
They said a certain area of it. They said the right amygdala.
Do you know what the right amygdala does?
They said they gave a reason for it in the paper. I can't remember what it was, but it made a lot of sense, and it was basically saying that your emotional reactivity to things reduces. So usually your fear. So the amygdala, obviously, just the brain in general, and any particular area of the brain, there's a lot more that we have to discover. No one can ever say for certain this is the role of this part. Well, they can for some parts, but a lot of it there's still, a lot still up for debate. A lot that still needs to be figured out. But the amygdala has certainly been implicated in fear, processing of fear, anxiety, arousal, in the regulation of how amped up you are, right? So what they were trying to say is that the process of meditation gets you to be more or less reactive to situations that occur. And that can be a good thing, right?
Yes, but that leads me to think about what your dad went through and what his family members said in response to him meditating so much, like he's like an icy cold person. Does the shrinkage of the amygdala actually reduce all emotions or just negative emotions in general? And even when it's just negative emotion, is that a good thing? Like if a close one passes away, if you don't show any negative emotion, is that a good thing? I mean, for yourself, maybe, if you don't have to go through it, if you're
Well,
accepting it better.
it's like saying it's like looking at the people that have that condition where they don't process any pain whatsoever. Pain can be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's there for a reason, and generally those people die young and they hurt themselves time and time again in horrific ways that, it's not going to help them learning if their learning process if they don't feel any pain. The same goes for emotion. Like, all emotions need to be there for a reason. But I think it's just the regulation of emotion can be in a good or a bad state, I guess. But just backtracking a little bit, I wanted to just sort of illustrate the fact that what's happening with meditation, it is a real phenomenon. Like, there's a lot of skepticism around whether it's just some hocus pocus, some religious bullshit. And like, I think in our time that a lot of that's changed. There's a lot more research showing how legit it is, but I don't have a full breakdown of what's going on inside the brain. I've just looked at a few studies, and so some Harvard study, MRI study, shows that meditation rebuilds brain's grey matter in 8 weeks, and I think that was in the hippocampus. There was increased grey matter density in the hippocampus, known to be important for learning and memory, and in structures associated with self-awareness, compassion, introspection. That's a study showing an increase in the hippocampus, and then another study was showing a decrease in the amygdala. So if you just associate with that with some of the things that we've learned about stress, and those brain regions that are involved in it, like, you can see that it's literally changing the way your brain operates, the way it controls your emotional regulation. Anyway, the point I'm getting at is, like, there's some real effects,
Yeah, but what do those effects mean? Do you remember Laura Corbett's lecture on fear and how she talks about the role of the amygdala, the hippocampus, and I don't know, something else as well. She talked about 3 areas of the brain that lights up that's responsible for different aspects of fear learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised as to what the amygdala was for. It wasn't just the regulation of emotion. It's not that general picture. It's very specific, and I can look that up.
Right, and let's get back into that. Let's look into that and get back into it in future podcasts. And so, but I guess what you're saying is that any particular brain region can be diverse in its roles, and it can be quite complicated in the way it works. And just saying that something's getting bigger or smaller doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. But it's getting bigger and smaller in certain ways. And basically, with what we know about neuroplasticity, I think the more you train it to operate in a certain way, it's basically reconfiguring itself to operate more and more in that way. So therefore, you're doing this training while you're sitting down, while you're walking around, whatever, but its after effects are because of these changes that are happening in your brain, which are going to persist and go across different contexts, which, like, as we know with, like, fear extinction, context can be really problematic, and it can be important if you've got something that can generalize, which helps you in a whole bunch of situations. That's very powerful.
Yeah, that's a really great point to drill home. The fact that just disregard all the areas that do change. I think that these neuroanatomical changes in general really reflect that when you meditate for a long period of time, I'm assuming it's for a decent amount of time, like weeks, right? In these studies, your brain
8
changes.
weeks. In many. Sorry.
Yeah. Your brain changes because you're getting better at it, right? Taxi drivers have a big hippocampus because they're good at what they do. They're good at remembering the roads. If your brain changes because of meditating, it means that the more you meditate, I assume, the better you are at meditation. And what does that mean when you're good at meditation? It means that you're good at observing yourself mentally and physically. It means that you're better at controlling. It means that you're better at getting where you want in life, or at that moment anyway, when you are conscious and in a meditative / mindful state. And I think that's a beautiful thing,
Yeah. I think we've done a pretty good intro of, I hope it's good, of meditation. We've skimmed across a whole bunch of different things. I think in future podcasts, I would like us to get into some of these studies a little bit more, and some of these questions around, well, for instance, like, is it going to make you icy cold person with no emotions? I think there's many different styles of meditation, which on top of just teaching you how to focus and stuff, like some really go into morals and teaching you how to grow your compassion and your love and everything, whereas other ones don't bother with that kind of shit. They're just teaching you to focus. And then anyway, there's a lot of interesting different effects that it can have. But just to wrap things up, like I'm hoping to have many podcasts where we talk about meditation and evaluate the latest research, etc., etc. But what's that really worth to a listener if we're just like saying, yeah, it's great, you should try it, but we don't do it? Like, I want this to be the start of us regularly practicing again.
All right.
So how do we get there? Like, we've meditated before, but we don't do it often. What's going on?
Well, for me, it's all about habits, and the habit broke.
The habit broke.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. The habit's broken.
Rest in peace, habit.
So, I mean, I feel like this podcast, it is sort of self-manipulation as to why you should meditate for us anyway, because we're talking about it for an hour now.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel really positive about it. We list all the reasons as to why we want to meditate. That's pretty much, a good motivation as to why we should start meditating again.
Okay, so we're motivated.
Are you?
I'm pretty motivated.
Okay.
But then you got to work out, like, when are you going to do it? What are you going to do when things come up? And, like, how are you going to increase it and make it a... So when something becomes a habit, it becomes automatic. And obviously that's what you want. How are we going to get from where we are now to that place where it's just automatic and daily?
I don't know. Do you have any plans?
Just so happens that I might.
All right, go on.
All right, 30-day challenge. Meditation.
Oh, okay.
No, you don't like 30 days?
No. It's just one of those things where you've talked about it and preached a lot, so I'm a bit over it. But yes.
Okay, no. Then come up with an alternative. You can name a different amount of days.
I can't. Sure, 30 days is required for a habit to form. 30-day challenge it is. Why are you looking at me like that?
That's funny. Okay, well, this is what I was thinking. We could treat it as a bit of an experiment, right?
Uh-huh.
A lot of these studies, I don't know how many. I've seen a few that have said 8 weeks. They've noticed, like, they've compared meditators to non-meditators, and then they've got the non-meditators to meditate for 8 weeks, and then compared the MRIs from 8 weeks earlier, and they're seeing neuroplasticity, they're seeing changes in the hippocampus and stuff. Like, that's this Harvard one right here. in 8 weeks, the brain's grey matter has changed. Just doing, I'm pretty sure, mindfulness-based meditative practices. So how about we do ourselves an 8-week challenge? And then we can report back via another podcast what the results have been. It's like an experiment.
Sure. Hey, wait a second. When they say grey matter, it means neurons. So rather than stronger connections, which is white matter, it means that new neurons are growing in
neurogenesis.
Yeah.
Yeah, neurogenesis.
Wow, that's pretty. Yeah, let's grow some grey matter.
Well, yeah, because when you look at it, it's kind of the opposite of depression or chronic stress, whatever you want to call it, which reduces your hippocampus and therefore leads to things like anhedonia, where you just can't enjoy. I want to get into those studies in our next podcast in 8 weeks about meditation.
Look, I don't think we should get too hung up on the hippocampus, because taxi drivers have a really big hippocampus. Doesn't mean that they're the most happy people on earth.
Yeah, but like you said, just because one brain region's involved in one thing doesn't mean it doesn't do other things. They might have just enhanced the memory aspects of it and not affected the emotional aspects of it. Like, we don't understand, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, 30-day challenge.
How many days are there in 8 weeks?
60.
60-day challenge. That's way more exciting than 30-day challenge.
Okay.
60-day challenge. We meditate for 8 weeks and we do a podcast at the end of it and tell people how great we feel.
Alright.
Alright. Are you self-manipulated, or should I manipulate you some more?
No. How are we going to measure this? Should we do a MMSE and a DAS?
Actually, well, I wanted to get into that as well. There's why don't we pick like one of these studies and use their questionnaires, their surveys?
Are they using surveys? I thought they were using fMRIs and stuff.
Yeah, but they're not just using that. They're using surveys as well. So participant reported reductions in stress were correlated with decreased grey matter. Oh, look, decreased grey matter density in the amygdala and increased in the hippocampus. So I think that's... And then I think they also say there's more connectivity from your prefrontal cortex. So basically it's putting you in more control and making you less emotionally reactive, more happy, all kinds of great things. But yes, they also use surveys. So we can just grab one and basically try and reproduce someone else's study.
Without the fancy technology.
Yeah, just our self-report, but we can then assume that those self-reports are correlating with these brain changes. And how good would that feel to be able to tell yourself, hey, I've changed my hippocampus and my amygdala. And fuck, I need it. I'm anxious as fuck.
Should we have a control? Like, do these surveys on 2 other people?
Let's find 2 people who are suitably similar to us, same sort of age, that are under similar sort of stress.
Yeah, we'll find someone.
Yeah. And then we'll report back and do a bit more research in that next 8 weeks.
Sure. If anyone wants to volunteer as a control subject, please contact us. We've got a Gmail account, intellectualconversationspc@gmail.com. Email us.
PC for podcast, in case you didn't get it. Yeah, email us. We'll send back the survey, and yeah, we might also do a video on this on our Live Life channel.
What, just us sitting there?
I don't know. Yeah, show us looking happy and meditating. Okay, scrap that part. I'll edit that. I can't rewind everything I say. I'm gotta stop saying that.
Alright, so are we out?
Okay, so I don't know exactly how, but somehow I'm gonna make it happen that me and you are gonna actually do this every day.
Alright.
And we'll put the keys to our success in the next podcast. So if you've gotten to this point, once again, thank you for listening.
Yep.
It's been great. See you next time.
Bye.